No amount of apology can ever repair the wounds done by some of these priests. Some of these victims have experienced such horrible experiences. Some have even committed suicide. But I do think the apologies have been good and have been sincere and are important. But I want to take a different approach and a different perspective. And the point that I want to make is that, you know, the sex scandal in the Catholic Church is absolutely horrible, but it's not just a Catholic priest issue. It's not just a Catholic priest issue, it's a cultural issue, it's a societal problem. You know, now if we're to look at the stats that from the report that the grand jury produced over a couple of years, the sad truth is, if they had done this investigation on any other large organization, the results would have been far worse and the findings would have been even more traumatic. So if you've read the 1,300-page document from the grand jury report, you will be able to bring out some statistics like there were 300 priests accused of inappropriate conduct with about 1,000 youth over the course of 70 years. And those numbers are staggering. And they really shock you at first. But if you dive deeper in and look at the stats and look at the numbers, it's not just talking about Catholic priests. I mean, it's talking about deacons, seminarians, religious brothers, and it spans a 70-year period. And there were some horrible, horrific things done within that time that is inexcusable. But in actuality, the percentage is very low when you consider the 5,000 priests that came through the Pennsylvania diocese over the course of that time. And then you have to consider that a huge majority of the cases were done in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. And finally, we have to consider that this was an investigation report with 300 priests accused, and none of them had an opportunity to defend themselves. Now, I'm not making an excuse for the guilty party. I hope the guilty are punished. I hope justice is served. I'm just trying to change the perspective. And the truth is after 2000, there was great reform in the Catholic priesthood, and there were great measures met. And in the 60s and the 70s, you know, when a priest or when anyone would get in trouble, they were sent to a psychiatrist and sent to psychological help and assistance and thought that that would help fix the problem. But now today we know better, and there's a zero tolerance policies. And if ever a priest is accused and found guilty, then they can't return back to the priesthood. Most of these cases happened decades ago and be very rare to find a recent case of sexual abuse. Another stat that I want to point out is of the 300 priests accused, not all of these accusations are valid or authentic. In fact, most of them can't be validated by the jury themselves or by the diocese. And if it's anything like the case in Boston that there's been extensive research and extensive study on by the John Jay University of Criminal Justice and other organizations studying and researching this, then about half of those accusations aren't valid at all. So if we're talking about just 150 priests of the 5,000 that went through the diocese over that 70-year period, then the numbers seem a lot more small, and that perspective is a lot different, although many would like to make you think otherwise. Now, why is this? Why do so many want to shame and attack the Catholic Church? And the reason is because they don't like the moral authority, because most people disagree with the Catholic Church's position on teachings on sexual morality, such as divorce, contraception, abortion, homosexuality, gay marriage. Considering that most people are offended by the Church's position on these stakes, what greater opportunity can it be to shame the very organization that is telling us that we are sexually inappropriate, and to come back and show them how sexually inappropriate they've been? It's been extremely shameful, extremely embarrassing, and absolutely an awful situation that there's no excuse for. But I'm hoping that with the stats and with understanding of the data that has been found, we can have a different perspective, and we can have a dialogue, and we can actually work to change and improve things. So the first point that I want to make is that this is not just a Catholic priest problem. This is a societal problem. This is a cultural problem. In fact, if you look at the data from the studies done from 1950 to 2000, it has been 4% of Catholic priests who've been accused of inappropriate sexual behavior. And if we look at the society as a whole, and if we were to ask women, 20% of them would say that they were abused as children, and 15% of men would say the same thing. So it's a far greater problem than just a Catholic priest problem. Catholic priests are a very small minority. Yes, they should be held to a higher standard. Yes, it's atrocious and it's awful and it's unacceptable, especially when a moral authority abuses that authority. And also another stat to consider is that most of these minors are post-pubescent teen boys. So it's not a pedophilia problem, it's not a rape problem. The sad truth is, if we were to investigate the government or public schools or Hollywood or universities or sports teams or other social teams and groups and organizations, the findings would be even worse. And that's a sad reality. So my challenge is to the laity. The laity makes up over 99% of Catholics. You know, the priests, the religion, the deacons, the seminarians, they only make up less than 1% of Catholics across the world. And if we want to see real reform, if we want to see real change within the church, within this world, it's got to be from the laity. We got to rise up. We got to protect our children. We got to protect our families. You know, to think that it's just a Catholic priest problem is like thinking that doping and cycling is just a Lance Armstrong problem. You know, we can take these stats from this finding, from this investigation, and we can frame it in many different ways. But the truth is, as a culture, we need to do better. It's a societal issue. When one priest goes down, the whole world knows about it. It's just like an airplane. One goes down, everybody's talking about it. You know, when we look at the stats, it's like interpreting those stats of Planned Parenthood, saying that they're just 3% of what they do is abortions. You know, how do we interpret those stats? How do we review the data? But more importantly, how do we respond to it? Instead of just having a scapegoat, we all love scapegoats, whether it's Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton or Obama or MTV or millennials or Hollywood, whoever we like to point the finger at and blame. It helps us feel better, our egos, for a short time, but it doesn't really do anything. While we always love a good scapegoat, it's more important to look in the mirror. If we want actual change, we need to rise up. We need to be saints. We need to change ourselves, and it starts with within. We need to grow closer to Jesus Christ. We need to root out the evil and the sin within our own hearts before we start to attack and point the finger at other people. And I think that's the call and the challenge and the final point that I want to make. As laity, if we want to see real change within the church, if we want to see real change within the world, it has to start within, from within, it has to be upon us. We need to rise up and understand that we are at war. There is a battle going on all around us. The family is under attack. And if we're to win this battle, we need more saints. We got to be holy, we got to be fierce, we got to be courageous, we got to be a beast for Christ. And no more pointing the finger, no more scapegoats. Take responsibility, own up, man up, and be a saint.